This is the Mark III rail square from benchdogs.co.uk, now known as the Ultra Max. Is it a worthy upgrade on the Mark II, or change for change's sake? Let's get into it. A few months ago now, Benchdogs launched this new rail square onto the market, and it really does have some awesome features that we're going to look at in this video today. The big question is, if you are a Mark II user, you've probably enjoyed that device. It's very precise, and I did a review of that here. So the big question is it worthwhile, the upgrade for this device? And that's what we're going to explore. So in this video, we'll start by looking at the use case for a rail square. What is it, what does it do, and why would you possibly want one? We'll then have a look at the range, the different options you can buy in this rail square, and some of those accessories as well. We'll then contrast it to the Mark II rail square to see if it's worth an upgrade if you're already a user of the Mark II square. What I then want to do is to look at the features and then put it through its paces, and then we'll do a final sum up. Now there's a bit of a bonus section at the end of the video where I want to use some good old-fashioned mathematics to see how accurate this thing actually is and whether it works for us in tolerance. So with that said, let's crack on and understand what a rail square is. If you're a user of tracks or rails, you're familiar with this, a track, and the idea of a track, it gives you incredibly accurate cuts when coupled with a track saw. The saw goes on top of the rail and you can make your cuts down the cutting edge. Now this is obviously a Festool system, but there are many manufacturers now creating this combination of track saw and some sort of rail or some sort of track. And I'm sure you've got your favourites that you use today. And if you are a track user, then this device is really useful for you. It simply clips onto your track in some way, shape or form, tighten down and locks into place, and now you've created a guaranteed 90 degree. So you can reference this edge on your board, make your cut, and you know that this edge of your board and the cut edge of the board are exactly 90 degrees. And it's that simple. So these are really useful when you're cutting things to length, when you're breaking down large pallets, and you want to make sure you've got that 90 degrees. That's what they do. Now you can buy this in one of three configurations. The first configuration, the base kit, comes with the square itself. It comes with a canvas storage bag, and it comes with a calibration report so you know how accurate the device is that you buy. And we're going to look at that calibration report in detail in the bonus section of the video. Typical Benchdogs, you always get some stickers thrown in, and you also get a nice keyring. Now this is a new sticker from Benchdogs, Masters of Precision, about this square. So we're going to take that and put it on our sticker wall. This one we've already got on our wall, so we don't need it. Now you can also buy a kit that's known as fully loaded, and if you buy the fully loaded kit, that comes with a sustainer. Now just for reference, the sustainer in the kit I've got here actually came back all the way from the Mark I rail square, which is the first rail square that I had. But you could still buy the Mark III with a sustainer, and inside the sustainer you're going to have a storage space for your rail square. Again, this is for the Mark I and the Mark II, but you get some of these gubbins here. Now what you get in these gubbins is you get two 30mm adapters, you get two 60mm adapters, you get two MFT table adapters, you get a couple of 30mm Benchdogs, you get what's known as B collars, and you get a number of different Allen keys for the kit, and you get the sustainer itself, and all that is known as the fully loaded kit. Now you can also buy some accessories with this, and these accessories basically are fences that attach to your square and give you repeatable cuts, and we'll look at that shortly. Simply, there's a calibrated scale, either in imperial or in metric, that bolts onto your square, and by using stops that come with the kit, you can then get repeatable cuts. So you can buy these accessories separately. You get the fence itself, and the fence can come sliced up so it fits into a sustainer, or it comes in a full metre length, or this pre-production one I've got here is a full 1.2 metre length that comes into two chunks. And depending which variant of fence that you go for, you get some accessories too. You'll always get a rather nice aluminium anodized flag stop. You'll get a couple of knurled knobs for attaching this to the device, and you'll get some connection bars for connecting your fence together, and the appropriate Allen key. But you can also buy a kit that will come in a sustainer, and in that kit you're going to get the square itself, the calibration report, a sliced up fence with appropriate connectors and gates, a sustainer that holds it all into place. What you can't get in a sustainer is the fully loaded kit plus the fence. So you're either choosing a sustainer fully loaded or a sustainer with the kit and the accessories. There's an additional accessory as well that's known as an extender, and you can extend the length of this to give you a reference area. Now if you're a user of something like a mega rail, and this one is 2.7 meters long, your square still fits on these fences. Ooh. Like so. But now this area here is obviously much longer than your reference area, and if you're using this to break up a full-size piece of MDF or plywood, obviously this is a very small reference fence for you, and it's going to be easy to twist that if you're cutting down the far end of your rail. So you can extend this to increase this reference area, and you can extend this as far as you want to by just buying different clip-on reference faces. So that's another accessory that you can get. You can't buy that extension in any part of the kit. It does come as an additional accessory. So to summarise, kit 1 with the canvas bag and the calibration report, kit 2 fully loaded with the sustainer and the calibration report, kit 3 the accessory fence, the square and a sustainer and the calibration report, extension accessories available, and you can buy the fences imperial and metric independently. So let's look at the price point for those kits. Now the square itself with the bag and the calibration report is going to come in at £125 including VAT. Now this video is March 2024. If you were to buy the fully loaded kit, the sustainer, all the various dogs inside that sustainer with the calibration report, no bag but includes a square, that will be fully loaded £227, and again including VAT. If you were to buy the square, calibration report and the fence all packaged away in a sustainer, that will be £227 including VAT. The extensions come in at £95 each including VAT, and you can buy the 1 metre fence imperial or metric for £76 including VAT. Now there is one variant of the fully loaded kit that you can buy. You can buy the square, the calibration report, the updated version of these dogs. These are all obviously silver. The updated ones are anodized in black, and they do look quite nice. And it will also come with a new insert for your existing sustainer. So you can rip this one out, bang your new insert in there, bang your new anodized dogs, and then you're good to go. And if you were to buy that kit, that's £189. So fully loaded, but without the sustainer, but it does include the insert. So a lot of choice there, and say those prices were right in March 2024. Now, as you know, I've had a relationship with Benchdogs for years, since Benchdogs started and since the channel started, and I still have knocking around the workshop Benchdogs' first ever product, which was a fence for an MFT table, which is where I first came across them and started the relationship. And because of that relationship, we have a really good offer code for you. If you want to buy anything from the Benchdogs website, not just this kit, use the code the Woodgrafter at checkout and get full 5% off your purchase. And thank you for Ralph for keeping that going for us, and as always, thank you for supporting the channel. So how does this one therefore compare with the Mark II one that you've probably already got if you've invested in this product? This is the Mark III square, and as you can see, obviously that's black. It's this nice anodized black, which is now a feature of most Benchdogs products. This is the Mark II, and you can see this was an earlier finish. It's actually a glass bead blasted finish. It gives this nice aluminium finish on here as well. Now this one is obviously shorter, and you may think that affects the overall reference face, but I'll come back to that in 1 second. This Mark II one had this beautifully designed sliding rail here that would support your square on the edge of your stock to stop it tipping over. This one doesn't have that, but what it does have is a different design underneath. You can see this is just a flat slab of aluminium, but on this one you can see you've got these cutouts here and here. So your reference face on this one that goes on the edge of your board is actually this inner face, not the outer face. And this outer face here is replacing the clip or the slider that you have. So there's no slider on this, it just rests on your board all the time and doesn't tip. And this face here is actually coplanar with this end piece here of the rail. So your reference face is actually this full length of the rail. Now yes, it's a little bit shorter, but not significantly shorter to cause you any problems. And obviously we can extend this one if we did want a longer reference face, where this one we couldn't extend. Now the next obvious difference is how this attaches to your rail. It's a similar sort of idea. You've got this positioning bar here, or you've got these two little knurls here, and they slot in to the channel on your fence, and they both sort of kind of just slide in there. Now on this one you've got these two pivot wheels, these two cams, and those two cams put pressure on this edge here of your rail, pushing it against this reference face to hold it all square. This one here has done away with those cams in the favour of a clip, and you can tighten this clip down and that pulls it into position, and it actually references against this edge here. Now, having used this for a long time, and some common feedback I get from users is these cams can come loose, and very often you've got to tighten these cams into position. So although it was designed to be toolless in use, you still sometimes have to tighten this one down to make sure it's not slipping in use. This one does away with that, and this clip is a really nice idea. And it simply clips onto the rail. You can tighten it down and then you can push the clip out of the way, and that's all really nice and firm, and that doesn't come loose in use. So Ralph has taken feedback from users about these cams and changed it to a far superior design on this one. Now the big difference is that this one will fit a whole host of different rails, where this particular one is designed for the Festool rails. Now on the Mark II range you can buy different squares for different rail types, so you can still use it across rails. You have one for Festool and one for Mefel and so on and so forth. But this one, there is only one that you buy, and this is now compatible with a whole host of rails. Now what you can start to see on here, there's a number of different positions that these little thumb screws can fit into. So in the position I've got it now, this will work for Festool, Makita, Triton, Milwaukee, Evolution, eBauer and Excel. If I had a Craig ACS type rail, I simply move those thumb screws up, and then that will now slide into the slot on the appropriate Craig rail. If I had the DeWalt, I simply move these up again, and that will now slide into the appropriate slot on the DeWalt. Now similarly, this clip here will also move, and if you turn it over, there's some more. There's a DeWalt slot here, and a Mefel, Bosch and Flex slot underneath here. And you simply take off your clip, move it over, put these in the appropriate position, or take them off if they're not required on your rail type, and therefore this will do a whole host of different ranges for you. Now I don't have any other system in the shop apart from Festool, and I don't intend to change from my Festool, but there's a video link here, and that will take you over to some videos that Ralph has done in Benchdogs that show you how to configure this for those different rails. So if you're not a Festool user, go and check that out, and you can see how easy it is to adjust and change this thing. So yeah, looking pretty good overall. Now both squares can take a variety of different accessories that we'll look at in a second. So they've all got these threaded holes, and that's not just about taking the various dogs, but it's also about being able to put onto this the extension rail. So both of these will work well with the repeatable stops, and both of these will work well with the various dog configurations. So there's no big changes there. What has changed is these middle holes here have been drilled out a bit wider. So initially when you had the repeat stop for this one, it went into these holes here that were slightly smaller in diameter than these holes, so your dogs wouldn't fit in here. All these holes now are the same size, which gives you a little bit more usability, because we can start to use this one for 45 degrees, which is pretty damn awesome, I think. Now just before we move on, just talk about this calibration report. What Ralph does on each of these devices he makes, and this is not checking a batch, every single one of these is tested for accuracy at the factory level, and you get a report that's directly relevant to the square that you've got. And somewhere, and hiding underneath this clip, there's a serial number. So this is serial number Mark 3 00011. Yes, this is the 11th one ever made. And on your report, you have a serial number here, 11. So this one is tied to this. They're a bit strange to read, but you're reading it in that orientation. These two blue lines here are these reference faces that we know are underneath there. This blue line here is this center point of this piece here, reference. These little blue lines here are this top reference edge here, and this blue line here is a very, very small edge here, or a lip that's a bottom reference edge. Now, depending on your configuration, festool, nafel, etc., depends about which ones these care about. But Ralph is measuring the accuracy between these two reference centers here and these three reference faces, this one, or this top one here, and that's what's in their report. Now, being a festool user, I care about this little blue line here, and this is telling me that my accuracy between this face and this is 89.99 degrees, and this reference face here is 90.01. Now, Ralph sets tolerances on these, and you also get a tolerance report with this as well. And Ralph allows for plus or minus 0.1 degrees on those measurements. So as long as your rail is reading a maximum of 90.1 or a minimum of 89.9, then it's in tolerance and it passes. So that obviously means if this was 90.1 and this was 89.9, then that will pass tolerance. But when you look at the impact on your square, that would be a 0.2 degree variance across the length. And the longer that your rail is, the more that will show in your final cut. So Ralph also measures a geometric tolerance here that will show the twist on your final rail against that one. And he also puts a 0.1 degree deviation on that in his allowable tolerances. So the maximum this is going to be out on your square is 0.1 degrees. And if you want to stick around for the bonus, I'm going to use some simple maths on this square to see how that actually stacks up. But that's what these reports are that you may care about, or then again, you may not. But just to know that that's checked in the factory against the square that will be shipped to you, and it's got a pass, and if it fails, it's not shipped to you, you get a different product. Good to know. What I now want to do is just sort of put this through its paces. I'm going to adjust this back to a festool configuration, just by dropping in these thumb screws here. Make sure they're nice and tight. And all you simply do is you take your rail and you slide this groove here, whatever rail you've got, onto those thumb screws into whichever position you've put them in. You take your clip, put it in the rail, and as you tighten that down, that's pulling your rail against one of those three reference fences that we saw, depending on what your configuration is, and then you can push that clip down out of the way. And you can see how that has now worked there on the back. This is obviously resting on the underside of my rail. Those two clips there are just positioning it, and that clip is pulling this rail back against this reference fence here. And depending on the rail that you're using, it's one of those three reference fences that we looked. So this is now really secure. It's not going anywhere. What I do love about is how quick that is. You just simply loosen that off, and it's so quick and easy to actually take the rail on and off. And that is a vast improvement on both the Mark II and the Mark I square that I've had previously. No tools whatsoever, but very, very secure. And even though I've got my board overhanging the edge of my bench, that cutout that we saw here means this sits nice and firm on the stock itself, and I can just go ahead and make my cut. And that's what I mean. If I just pull it back a little bit so that cutout's not resting, you can see this has a tendency to tip. So it's quite a good design we have here, that just rests nicely on the board in that position, and I can now go ahead and make my cut. Now, the fully loaded kit also comes with some of these dogs. These are 30mm dogs, and these are 60mm dogs. And remember, on the new kit, these will be anodized in black, but exactly the same thing. And these quite happily just slot into these holes here. Now these are pretty important to you depending on the type of work that you do. If you're just breaking down a board that's got this nice square edge to the surface, then you don't really need this. But in this configuration, the inside of the 60mm dogs are your reference edge. So you can bring that up to the end, and your bull nose here makes no difference. You've still got a secure reference point. And you've got two sizes, obviously, depending on the bull nose. Now the 30mm ones work incredibly well for most standard worktop surfaces you get in a kitchen. The 60 ones are very useful if you have a really deep moulding on there and you want to make sure you've got a good reference point. That's where these really come into their own. The MFT adapters are pretty much what they say on the tin, and again they can screw directly into that hole, and these will now simply mount into an MFT top, providing you've got the standard grid of holes. Your rail will nicely slide onto that, tighten into position, and you can now use this device with MFT to make these gorgeously square cuts, and that's a good alternative to the fence system and the dogs I normally use on my table. Now that has another trick up its sleeve, because here you've got two more inner holes that have got 45 degrees stamped onto them or etched into them. And if I was to move my dog down to that 45-degree hole, this again will slot into my MFT, but now I've got a 45-degree to the grid of my holes. So if I drop a couple of standard dogs in my bench, reference my stock against those dogs there, this will now allow me to make a 45-degree cut on this board. So it's very, very versatile when you start to use it with an MFT type top for both 45 and those 90-degree cuts on your stock. Now these B-collars simply slot onto your MFT adapters, and you'll see there's a number of lines etched onto those MFT adapters, and that allows you to adjust these positions for the thickness of your stock. And that allows you to position this from a distance from the bench that's commensurate with the thickness of your overall stock, and that just makes sure everything is nice and firm as well. Now if you are using the B-collars on your MFT adapters to allow for the thickness of your stock when you're using this rail, obviously these B-collars are going to stick out further than your standard reference edge here. They fit over a little bit, they overlap a bit. And that's where these devices come in. So these 30mm bench dogs allow you to set a reference point that allows for the width or the diameter of your B-collars, and that's what they are for. So is that fully loaded kit worth it? Well, if you're a regular user of an MFT and you want to mount your square onto your MFT for good, accurate, fast, repeatable cuts and lining up, allowing for stock of different thicknesses, yes it is. It really works well. And equally, if you regularly do the bull noses or profiles on cuts, then yes, it also adds value in that space as well. But if you're not doing that, if you're not an MFT user, or you don't want to mount this thing to your MFT, or you're not using bull nose or deep profiles, then just go for the square, because it's an awesome device. But regardless of what camp you're in, one thing that's really worth considering is the repeatable stop, the fence system that you can have here. Now this was actually a pre-production, so if you were to buy this now, this will come into a single length, a 1 meter length of fence. If you were to buy the one into the kit, it would come in, I think it's 3 different lengths of stock. So that's quite useful, because we can show how you connect these together. And this is the same, and this will be exactly the same technique regardless of what you have here. In your kit with your broken up fence, you're going to get one of these fence connectors. And similarly, it's a fence connector that also works on these fences, also works on the extension fences for the CSC system that I reviewed some months ago. You get some Allen keys in the kit, you simply slide in your adapter to the V slot, slide in this adapter here, bring those up so they're nice and centered, and tighten down your adapter, and you've now got, in my case, a 1.3 meter fence. You've got this little clip here that you simply slots into this side, and that just gives you some additional support on that fence. Now once we've got our repeat stop fence assembled, we need to mount it to the square. And if you look on the square, there's these holes here on the inside, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're marked with RS. They're a smaller diameter than the holes we've looked at for the various accessories. In the kit you're going to get these thumb screws, and with those thumb screws come these little plastic washers, so make sure you don't lose those. On your rail you're looking for these two elongated slots here, and you've got this cut out here, so it's these two elongated slots, and you position those over those holes there, those RS holes, and then you simply use your thumb screws to secure that into place, like so. Now we need to calibrate this. Now the calibration gauge is interesting, and this will come in either imperial or metric. This is obviously a metric. And you can see it's got two scales. This top scale here starts at around about 19 millimeters, and this bottom scale here starts at 17 millimeters. And that's because the accessory is also allowing for multiple rail configurations. So the top scale you're going to use for a Festool, Makita, a DeWalt, a Craig ACS, a Milwaukee, a Triton, a Bauer or an XL. And the bottom one here you're going to use for Mafell, Bosch or Flex. So obviously the scale you use depends on the rail. So once you've got your repeat stop connected to your square, you need to calibrate this to your rail. So we bring our rail in, no dramas here, we know how to connect this now. Now once you've got this set, you want to calibrate this. So I'm going to come in and choose a measurement on my rail of 25. The reason I've set that for 25 centimeters is I can now come in with a suitable set square, and this is a Benchdogs precision square. Now I can bring in my set square, and I can use this edge here of my set square as a reference point against my nylon cutting strip, which just makes life easier for me. And now I can make sure, loosen these off, and I can just bring this up till that rests on the end of my square, like so. And now I can just nip that down. So I now know that the inside of my flag is reading exactly 25 centimeters to my cutting edge, because I've used some sort of measuring device to do that. And I find it's easier to do with something like a square like this, but you could use a tape measure, or you could use a rule just as equally. So we've had a look at the various options, we've looked at that all important price point, we've compared it to the Mark II square, we've looked at the accessories, we've chucked on and set up our fence and got it all calibrated. Time to make a cut, I think. So let's put this thing through its paces and see if it actually works. I'm going to set this to 50 on my top rail, bring it up to there. Now I do like the way that this repeat stop is sitting on here, because it still allows my square to reference on top of the board. It's not tipping, and I was a bit worried that it might do, but that's really quite a nice design. So we're going to go ahead and make a cut. Just going to use some of these Benchdogs tabletop protectors to lift my stock up from my bench so I don't cut in to my bench. So just turn my board so I can reference against this edge that we've just cut, make sure it's referenced, make sure it's on that mark on the flagstop. So this was the first cut that we made, reference against this edge. Then we use this edge to make this cut. So in theory, this board should be 50. And it is. Now, if this was accurate from the factory, the angle between these two edges that we cut should be 90 degrees. So I'm going to come in with my square. Wow. And that, according to my square, is 90 degrees. And I don't think you can say fairer than that for accuracy. So there you go, that's the Mark III rail square from benchdogs.co.uk. Is it a worthy upgrade? Yes, it is. Some of the features this now brings to the party are really good. I love the inbuilt rest rather than having the sliding plate. I like the fact that you can adjust this to multiple rail systems, so I can invest in this once, and even if I upgrade my rails over time, I can still use this device with them. This clip here is so quick and easy and accurate to use that it blows the Mark II out of the water when you look at those overall cams. I love the fact I can extend the reference point on this. That's really going to be useful when I'm using my long rail for breaking down big sheets. And I love the repeatability and the simplicity of that repeatable fence as an overall accessory. So yeah, I can highly recommend this. I really do like it. Don't forget that that clip is available as an upgrade option on your Mark II square, wherever I've put that. So if it's just a clip you're after, you don't need to invest in this. Just reuse what you've got and upgrade it. All the accessories you may have with your Mark I and Mark II are compatible with this one. So again, good reuse there as you buy into the Benchdogs brand. So that's pretty much it for the video. Highly recommended. Don't forget to use the code Woodgrafter at checkout if you decide to buy this one. If you're leaving me now, thank you. Take care in the workshop and I'll see you next time. If you're sticking with me, let's do some more detailed checks on this because I want to look at the accuracy and the overall tolerance. So you're still with me then. I actually want to see how accurate this is. Obviously in that cut that we did, we checked it with our square and it was good. It looked pretty good to me, and therefore we already know it's good enough for woodworking. But I'm just curious and I just want to see how accurate this thing actually is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use what's known as a 5 cuts method that you've probably seen me use before. And it's used an awful lot for setting up machineries. You take a piece of stock, you do 5 cuts, you can measure the deviation from 90 degrees using some mathematical formulas, and you can adjust and dial in fences or sleds or other sort of things. And we're going to use the same thing here. So we don't need to worry about repeat stops or anything else. I'm going to give ourselves a reference line just by doing a cut, and I don't care whether that cuts square to anything or not. I just want a known straight reference edge. I'm then going to use that reference edge to make a cut here, to make a cut here, to make a cut here, and then I'm going to recut that first reference point we made, and I'll use the offcut to measure the deviation, and we'll look at the maths behind that shortly. So this is going to be cut 1. This here is going to be cut 2, this here is going to be cut 3, this here is going to be cut 4, and this here is going to be cut 5. Now the interesting thing about this technique, it starts to have a cumulative error. So if this thing is out in any way, shape or form, we're going to amplify the error. Let me quickly explain what I mean by that. If I cut this reference edge and then I do my second cut against that reference edge, in theory that should be 90 degrees. But let's assume that it's not, and let's assume that we're going to get a cut of 91 degrees, because let's assume that this thing's out by a full degrees. Then when I use this reference edge and I make this cut, this angle here will also be 91 degrees because this thing is consistent in its inaccuracy. 91 degrees, 91 degrees. Then when I come along to this cut here and use this reference edge to make this cut, this will also be 91 degrees. And when I use this reference edge to make this cut, this will also be 91 degrees. Now these errors are cumulative. So if I have a 1 degree error here, when I look at this angle with respect to my first reference edge, that's going to be this error here plus this error here. So now my inaccuracy is 2 degrees because I've got a 1 degree inaccuracy here and a 1 degree inaccuracy here, so it's 2 degrees. And when I get to here, my inaccuracy to my reference edge is 3 degrees. And when I get to here, my inaccuracy to my reference edge is 4 degrees. And that's why the techniques work so well, because I can amplify the overall error. Now I do allow for that amplification in the final mathematics, and we'll look at that shortly. But for now, let's go ahead and make these cuts. First cut is purely to give me a reference edge. I use a reference edge for cut 2, use cut 2 to give me cut 3 to give me cut 4, and cut 4 to give me cut 5, and then we'll use the offcut to measure any tolerance. I don't care what size the board is at all, in any way, shape or form. So I can just go ahead and make some cuts. Now I'm going to come in for cut number 5, which is going back to the first edge that we actually cut. And this time I do want to give myself a little bit of measurement. So I'm going to, I don't really care what it is, but just something I can measure. So I'm going to come into a nominal 50 and just set this somewhere around about 50 millimeters. Not accurate, don't really care if it is or it isn't, just to give me some width to work with when we do some measurements and we make our final cut. I also want to recognise A is where we're starting the cut and B is where we're ending the cut. I don't actually care about this piece now, that can go. is this piece here that I do care about. So we know this was the start of our cut, and that's the end of our cut. So I want to take some measurements here. I'm going to come in with my digital calipers, and I'm going to take my first measurements, and I want to measure this end piece here. And this end here is 46.99. And I want to come in and measure B, and B equals 46.60. Now I want to measure the length of this piece. Now that's going to be quite hard because obviously this is not long enough, but what I can do is set this to its maximum distance of 150 and lock that into place at 150. Now the length I want to measure is the length of the last cut that we made, which was this side of the board. This was the first cut, this was the fifth cut, so I just want to measure that. So I can just come in with my digital caliper here, get it to the end, put my knife against that other face and make a slot. Now I can just come into that mark that we made, put my calipers here and make a slot, find that slot that we made, put my calipers here and make a slot there. So we know that we've got 1, 2, 3 slots, with this final slot being somewhere here. And now I can just come in into that last slot that we made and just measure to the end of the stock, and that's giving me 44.94. So my overall length is 150 times 3, which is 450, plus 44.94, which is giving me 494.94. Cool. So this piece of stock is 494.94 millimeters long, it's 46.99 millimeters wide, and it's 46.60 millimeters wide. Now that's as accurate as I can measure this in the shop. So obviously there's going to be human error, inaccuracies in my gear inside here, but it's going to be near enough for what we want to look at. So my equation is going to be sine minus 1 multiplied by 46.99, the distance at A, minus 46.60, the distance at B, all divided by my length of 494.94, with the entire thing divided by 4. And the reason we're dividing that by 4 is I had cumulative error across 4 angles, if you remember, so we just allow for that in the calculation. Sine minus 1, A minus B over the length, all divided by 4. That's the mathematical equation. And rather than do it in my head, because I couldn't, we can come in with a calculator. I'm not sure if you know, if you have an iPhone, just turn the iPhone on its side and you get a scientific calculator, which is really quite useful. And here, there's a thing called second, a little button here called second 2ND, and that gives you a second option on these. And here you've got sine, so if you do second and put sine, that's sine minus 1, which is exactly what we need here. Okay, so 46.99 minus 46.60 equals 0.39. So I've got 0.39 millimeter deviation between these two ends of my stock. I'm now going to divide that by the overall length, divided by 494.94 equals, 494.94 equals 0.0008797. Cool. And then I'm going to take the arc sine of that 0.0077897, so sine minus 1, and that equals 0.045 147 and lots of numbers, and then I'm going to divide that by 4, and that equals 0.0113 is near enough. So my square has got an error of 0.0113 degrees. Wow, now that is accurate. If I actually look at what Ralph is saying here on his calibration report, he's telling me that the angle I care about is somewhere between 0.039 and 0.059, because that's the two geometric tolerances here. So if I take 0.049 and minus 0.039, that equals, strangely, 0.01. So in my mathematical calculations, I'm looking at an error of 0.0113. Ralph's calibration report tells me to 2 decimal places 0.01. And although Ralph's machine is much more accurate than the way I've done it here with my sort of kind of cheap woodworking tools, I mean, that speaks for itself. So if you do want to find the accuracy of your T-square, that's how you do it, using the 5-cut method and a simple bit of mathematics. So thank you for sticking around for the bonus piece. I hope you found that useful. Look after yourselves, take care in the workshops, and I'll see you next time.